सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। सदाशिवसमारम्भाम् शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ताम् वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पाद शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं। शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः। I had a very naughty friend. You know what he used to do? Whenever we used to go to some festival grounds, he used to take one handful of nuts and bolts. And then we used to go to this festival grounds. And then this fellow used to sit in a giant wheel. You know that? Huge wheel which rotates. This festival grounds and all you will find. Huge one. So he would sit in that one of the seats. And when it rotates and when it reaches the top, so now he is here, second last height, then he will call the person who is on the top. And he will say, "Sir, just now from your seat, these nuts and bolts have fallen down." Now he is on the top. He has been shown these nuts and bolts. Just now from your seat, from the below, it has fallen down. Now you can imagine the condition of that person. Around 100 feet high. From there, his only support, his only refuge is the seat, and somebody shakes the very faith in that seat. Isn't it? Now where will he hang on to? Nothing else is left. Shankaracharya shows us the nuts and bolts of the worldly seat, which is very shaky. We are so confidently seated that this worldly seat is so firm, fully secured as though. So Bhagavan says, really speaking, this seat is not firm. So how does he prove it? Through the first 6 verses, he points out the limitations of the worldly knowledge, the worldly wealth, the worldly pleasures, the worldly existence, the worldly love, and then the worldly relationships. So he has proved that anything of the world is impermanent, is conditional, is finite, and therefore it cannot give you lasting happiness, lasting peace. So then what we are supposed to do? There is something which can give you lasting peace, lasting security. And what is that? Govinda alone, which is your own self. Now where will you gain this knowledge of Govinda, of God? So then Bhagavan says, you will gain the knowledge of God. How to reach God, how to realize God. There is only one way. And what is that way? Satsang. So through satsang, not only that you get the path to reach God, even while living in the world, while facing challenges, while facing problems of life, this knowledge which you gain in satsang will give you inner strength to face life. So now the question is, now we are convinced, fine, I must attend satsang. Now the question is, whom should I approach to? So naturally we must approach a teacher, a realized person, a knowledgeable person who can guide us step by step. Now the question is, who is that teacher? Very many times we look at the external feature and then decide whether the teacher is realized or not. Because normally every one of us, we have a notion that a God realized person should be a person totally different from others. Isn't it? So that is why Arjuna asks in the second chapter, Sthita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava sthitadhi kim prabhasheta kim asita vrajeta kim. The question is very strange. So Arjuna is asking, if there is a person who is a God man, who has become one with God, how he will be? What will be his language? How will he sit? How will he walk? How will he talk? Because we have this strange notion that once a person knows God, he should be a person totally different from the rest. Is it that he will always look at the eyebrow? Is it that he will always sit in Padmasana or Shirshasana, whatever? Strange notions are there about realized saint. So therefore, now Shankaracharya says, don't evaluate or judge the saintliness of a person by the external look. External looks are deceptive. Let us chant 14th verse. Jatilo mundi lunchita keshaha Kashayambara bahukrita veshaha Pashyannapi chana pashyati mudho Udaranimittam bahukrita veshaha Bhaja Govindam Govindam bhaja mudhamat. Yes. So my dear, don't go by external looks. External marks of saintliness need not necessarily reflect the inner saintliness, inner virtues. So what are the external marks? Some specimens are given. What are they? Jatilaha. So there is one saint. They are all kapata sannyasis, okay. The following descriptions are all of people who are fake fakirs. Jatilaha. Jatilaha means jatadhari. Big jata is there, matted lock. And another person, mundi. Mundi means clean shaved. Another one, lunchita keshaha, is plucking one hair after another. Lunchita kesha. Another one, kashayambara, bahukrita veshaha. Another one, wearing ochre robe. So now you can add big rudrakshas, big marks on the forehead, ashes here and there, all over the body. All these are external marks. Now remember, just because these marks are there doesn't mean that he is saintly or otherwise. Bhagavan says, Pashyannapi chana pashyati mudhaha. These foolish people who are trying to deceive others, though they are seeing, they are not seeing. Then why did they wear this dress? Udara nimittam bahukrita veshaha. There is only one purpose. What is that? Udara nimittam. For the belly sake. Belly sake means you will get respect, you will get food. Without work, you will get everything. So therefore, people take up this dress. Now here what we have to understand is, the saintliness of a person has nothing to do with external characteristics. It is not necessary that a saint must be a sannyasi, a renunciate. He can be a grihastha also. He can be a person with a family, with wife, with children. All these are possible. He need not be in a particular caste. He need not be only Brahmana. That is also not necessary. He need not be only Indian. That is also not necessary. He need not be only Hindu. That is also not necessary. The caste, nationality, creed, religion, gender, they don't decide the saintliness of a person. Then what decides the saintliness of a person? The inner virtues. How cheerful that person is. How does he face the problems? Is he having the ability to face the problems cheerfully? Has the person devotion for God? Does he have dispassion, discrimination? Does he have perfect control over his mind? Is he contented in himself? These are all the signs of a truly saintly person. How does he carry himself? How does he behave with others? All these reflect the inner saintliness. So therefore, don't get cheated by the external appearance. And those people who are trying to cheat others, Bhagavan says, Pashyannapi chana pashyati moodhaha. So some people, because they find that all the sannyasis, they get lot of respect, lot of reverence, people bow down at their feet. So therefore what they do, they put on this dress. They are totally hollow within. They don't have any idea about what scripture says. They don't have any virtues. In order to get this cheap respect, reverence, they put on this dress. So here Bhagavan says they see, but they do not see. Now what does it mean? They see the outer glory of a sannyasi, of a realized man, but they don't see the inner glory. The outer glory is very clearly seen. Why? Because people are respecting them, revering them, so naturally the outer glory is seen. But what is that inner glory? Inner glory is total freedom. Inner glory is total control over one's own mind. Inner glory is total contentment. Inner glory is total detachment from everything of the world. Inner glory is the joy of devotion which he every moment experiences. These are all the inner glories which these fools don't see. Only the outer glory is seen. In India we will find sannyasis very much respected and revered. He may be a kapata sannyasi, but even then he is also respected. I am told that almost 90% of the sannyasis are fake only. In Himalayas you find. That is why it is said Ravana, in order to kidnap Sita, which form did he take? He took the form of a sannyasi. Meaning what? Even Ravana knew the glory of sannyas. That is why he took that dress. He knew that a sannyasi is respected. So the inner glory is not seen, only the outer glory is seen. Udara nimittam. For what? For respect, for name, fame, recognition, for money, etc. So beware. So when you want satsang, choose your guru also properly. Understand it properly. Fine. Now, what about those people who say, I don't bother about satsang. I know how to live my life. I don't think satsang is very, very essential. It is not very important. There are so many people living happily in this world. I don't think satsang is unavoidable. So in order to prove the value of satsang, how much important satsang is, when I say satsang means right knowledge about living. Now here comes the 3 verses. In these 3 verses you will find how people suffer in the world not knowing how to live a rightful way. You will find a person who has mastered the mind alone enjoys life. Now you will find how unintelligently a person deals with one's own mind because he doesn't have the knowledge of dealing with the mind. This knowledge is obtained only in satsang. Now because he has not attended satsang, he doesn't know how to handle the mind. So various unintelligent ways of handling the mind, that is what is represented now. Let us chant verse number 15. Angam galitam palitam mundam dashana vihinam jatam tundam vruddho yati grihitva dandam tadapi namunchatyasha pindam bhaja govindam govindam bhaja mudhamat. Yes, a small introduction before entering into this verse. For all of us, the problems are the same. how to handle the mind. What does the mind do? Mind time and again comes up with desires. And what is desire? Desire is nothing but disturbance of the mind. The moment a desire erupts from the mind, there is disturbance. And now, there are various ways by which you can handle this desire. Because any desire in the mind is a disturbance, so every one of us, we try to quench the desire through so many ways. Now here, one way is given, and this way is called the technique of indulgence. What is technique of indulgence? Whenever the mind comes up with a desire, fulfill that desire. So when the desire is fulfilled, what happens to the mind? Mind becomes quiet. This is the most, simple way of handling the mind. Whatever mind comes up with, if the mind is tempted to do something, just yield to temptation. That is the best way of, or the easiest way of handling the mind. Right? The indulgent way is what is mentioned here. So here, Angam Galitam. So this person has become very old. Throughout his life, he has done only one thing. What is that? Whenever the desire comes, fulfill it. Whether it is good or bad, don't think about it. Desire means fulfill. So thus, this person has become very old. So now what is his condition? Angam Galitam. The body has become infirm. Palitam Mundam. The hair has become white. Dashana Vihinam Jatam Tundam. The mouth has become toothless. Vruddho Yati Gruhitva Dandam. So this old man, he is walking with what? Stick. So he is walking. Up to this, it is not because of indulgence. This is common to all. But the next line is important. What is that? Tadapi na munchati asha pindam. What is he carrying? Asha pindam, a bundle of desires. His heart is filled with desire, full of desires. Throughout his life, he has satisfied all desires. But has the desires been quenched permanently? No. Desires are still young. Body has become old, but the desires are young. Meaning, any amount of fulfilling the desires, it is not going to get quenched. It is not going to get satisfied. The more and more you satisfy the desire, the more and more it becomes intense. For the time being, it becomes as though quenched, but actually, it is something like fire. Last class we were discussing. Dushpurena analena cha, like fire. The desires of the mind cannot be satisfied. So here, the technique of indulgence is given. This is one way, and you will find that majority of the people belong to this category. Whenever there is a desire, fulfill it. Don't think whether it is right or wrong. If you like it, do it. If you don't like it, don't do it. Meaning, living according to the whims and fancies of the mind. Not applying one's own intellect. Now you know the difference between intellect and mind, isn't it? Intellect is that faculty in us based on which we decide what is right and what is wrong. Mind is that faculty in us based on which we decide what I like and what I dislike. So mind takes decisions based on likes and dislikes. Intellect takes decisions based on right and wrong. So whom should we follow? We should follow the intellect, because that is the one which shows you the right guidance. Now here is a person who has totally ignored the intellect. And now he is behaving just like an animal based on the instincts of the mind. So what is the end result? End result is that the desires have become very strong. The mind, the indisciplined mind has become very strong. And this very same mind becomes the greatest enemy of this person. Uddhared atmanatmanam na atmanam avasadayet atmaiva hi atmano bandhu atmaiva ripuratmanah. Bhagavad Gita. Your own mind is your greatest friend if disciplined. Your own mind, if indisciplined, becomes your greatest enemy. Now in this person's case, his own mind becomes the greatest enemy. His mind has become so strong that now his mind is the master, he has become the slave. Now who has made his own mind the master? He himself. By continuously following the whims and fancies of the mind, now he has a mind which commands over him. He is a helpless person now. To give some example, the health is going, doctor says don't eat sweets, but does he listen? He will not. The moment he sees sweets, he knows he is a diabetic patient, but even then, by giving some or the other reasons, excuses, this is prasad, so prasad can be had, etc., etc. The fact is, he loves to eat sweet. It is not because of the sanctity of prasadam he is having it. Okay, if at all you want to have prasad, why don't you have a little bit? No, he will have the whole thing. These are all the indications of an indisciplined mind. And not only that, the mind is so restless. So now the eyes are not able to see, the ears are not able to hear. Even then this person also wants to go to picnic along with his family members. The son says, Father, you be here. It is very difficult. You can't even walk. Please don't come. We will take care of everything here. Let us go. But the old man says, no, I am also coming. Now what to do? We must know how to grow old in a dignified manner. This is we have to learn. So once we come to know that yes, our senses are becoming weak, I am growing old, what are we supposed to do? We should learn to be independent, independently happy. Don't depend too much on others. I am not talking of physical dependence. Physically everyone has to depend. But psychological dependence is something which you can totally get rid of. I want my son to be near me always. This is a psychological dependence. You should be able to be happy without anyone with you. And you should allow your children, to go for picnic or whatever. And you should accept your limitations and don't create problem for others. This is called dignified way of growing old. So then you will find that your own children will respect you so much. You know that I am creating a problem for them if I join them, because I am not able to walk, I am not able to eat well, can't see, can't hear properly. So I will be a trouble for them. So therefore let me withdraw. Now this is called, dignified way of growing old. So you are not depending on anyone. You are not creating any problem for anyone. This way is possible only when you are self-contented, only if you have learned to extract the inner joy of the self, only if you have tuned yourself to God. Once you have tuned yourself to God, you will find that you are free from all kinds of psychological dependence. So then you will find your own family members, your son, your daughter, respecting you so much. So now, this is the first way of unintelligent way of dealing with the mind. Now remember, we are talking of people who don't attend satsang. The glory of satsang can be known only by seeing how people without the right knowledge suffer in the world. So this is the first specimen. What is that? Whenever there is a desire in the mind, how does he face it? Fulfill it. And thus, slowly he becomes a slave of the mind. Now the next specimen, what does he do? He goes just the other direction. Let's see the verse. Agre vannihi prishte bhanuhu ratrau chubuka samarpita januhu karatala bhikshastarutala vasaha tadapi namunchatyasha pashaha bhaja govindam govindam bhaja mudhamat. Yes. Now is discussed the condition of a person who does just the opposite. What does he do? Whenever desires come from the mind, what he does is he just suppresses it. This is called technique of suppression. Earlier the technique was technique of indulgence. Whenever desire comes, satisfy. Now here, what does he do? Whenever the desire comes, what does he do? He just suppresses it forcefully. Suppose the mind says, I want this. Immediately he will give one slap, tight slap, like we do with children, So when you beat the child, when the child asks something which he shouldn't have asked, next time the child will not ask. He will be scared. Isn't it? In the same way, what does this person do? He tortures his body. Whenever the mind comes up with any kind of desire, immediately he tortures. He says, okay, fine, today no food. Now who suffers? The mind suffers. There is a pain, there is suffering. Some kind of physical torture he will give. So therefore, the mind, out of fear of the torture, will not express the desire. But remember, the desires are all there inside, suppressed. Technique of suppression. Now this person, how does he torture his body? Agre vannihi. In front, what is there? Fire. Prishte bhanuhu. At the back, there is sun. This is called, what you call, Panchagni Tapasya or something. So 5 places he puts fire. And then on the top, sun. In summer, in peak summer, this is the tapas he does. Sitting in front of, amidst fire. And in the winter, what does he do? No blanket. He will lie down open, exposing himself to the extreme cold. Ratro chubuka samarpita januhu. In the night, how does he sleep? He is exposing his body, torturing his body. Chubuka samarpita januhu. Chubuka means chin. That has been offered into januhu means what you call? Knees, correct. So like this. So knees here, chin here. So in the night, because there is shivering cold, he will not use any blanket. Parama Vairagi, you may say. No possessions at all. Does he have any plate? How does he have food? Karatala bhikshaha. How does he eat food? With the hands. No plates, nothing. Meaning, he doesn't have anything to call his own. And where does he stay? Tarutalavasaha. Where does he stay? He has no house of his own. He stays under some tree. Fine. What is the state of his mind? Tadapina munchati asha pasha. He is very well bound by the ropes of desire. So this is the other case, other extreme. Complete suppression. Forcefully, by torturing the mind, he has suppressed and kept the mind. But suppressing the desire doesn't mean end of desire. Desires are very well there. Out of his own will force, he has kept it suppressed. Now there are times when your will not be strong. At that time, everything will come out. Last time I was giving the example of pressure cooker, isn't it? How long can the pressure cooker handle pressure? It comes out. Or something like a compressed spring. As long as the force is there, so long the spring appears to be compressed. In Upadesha Saram, Ramana Maharshi gives another example. Jala pakshivat roda sadhanam. Just like a bird caught up in the net. The bird wants to fly. But now the bird is not able to fly. Why? Because there is this net. So just because the bird is not flying doesn't mean the bird is tamed. The moment the net goes away, the bird also flies. So this is also not a healthy way of dealing with the mind. In meditation, when such a person meditates, what happens is, there is neither wandering of the mind, because in order to wander, the mind must entertain desires. So therefore, wandering is not there. Sleeping is also not there. You understood? Normally, when a person meditates, the first thing is sleep. If it is tamas, goes to sleep. If it is rajas, the mind starts wandering. Now this person who has got all the desires suppressed, he will neither have a wandering mind, nor will he have a sleeping mind. He will have a suspended mind. Apparently it appears to be peaceful, but deep down all the desires are very well there. This is called as kashaya. So after meditation you ask, I don't know whether I have meditated or not. I am sure I have not slept, but this doubt comes. Which only means that deep down the desires are there. So this is also a very unhealthy practice. Now remember, because he is practicing all this suppression, normally people think that he is a great yogi, he is a great vairagi. See, he doesn't have any house, nothing of his own, no clothes, nothing. Definitely he must be a great Mahatma. This is how the external world will rate him. But actually what is within? Bhagavan Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita says such a person is a hypocrite. What is that verse? Karmendriyani sanyamya yaaste manasa smaran indriyarthan vimudhatma mithyacharah sa uchyate. So externally he appears to be very disciplined. The body is not moving, the eyes are closed. So we may think that he is meditating, but inside what is happening? All desires are there in full measure. He is indulging in pleasures with his mind. Externally he may appear to be very disciplined. So this also is not the way of handling the mind. So what is the first technique? The technique of indulgence. What is the second technique? The technique of suppression. Now the third one, the technique of distraction. What is that? Let us see. 17th verse. Kurute Ganga Sagar Gamanam Vrata Paripalanam Athavādanam Jnana Vihinah Sarvamatena Bhajati na muktim janmashatena Bhaja Govindam Bhaja Govindam Govindam Bhaja Mudhamat. First let me give an example. Especially the modern mothers, they do this. What do they do? When the child becomes very naughty, doesn't listen, what she does is, she switches on the TV, some Cartoon Network, especially Pogo, etc. and gives one packet of kurmure. Now the child is fully occupied. The junk food is there and the program is there. Now father and mother has got a perfect peace. Yes or no? This is called the technique of distraction. This is how normally sometimes we handle our mind also. See, handling your children and handling the mind, it is almost the same. So first technique of indulgence is called technique of pampering. Whenever the child creates problem, immediately give whatever the child asks. So such a child is called pampered child. Then the second one is give him properly. To such an extent that the child doesn't ask anything, even dare to ask anything. That is the technique of suppression. Now the third one is called the technique of distraction. So whenever the child is crying too much for something, distract the attention. Take away the attention to something else. Divert the attention. Right? Now what is the problem we are facing? The mind is disturbed because of so many desires. So now what you have to do? In front of that disturbed mind, put so many attractive things so that the mind will go towards that and forget about that which it is crying for. Normally we do this. Eating out, etc. is nothing but this technique of distraction only. I am not able to handle my mind, so some kind of distraction is given to the mind. People are so interested in gossiping only because of this. Deep down the mind is agitated. So when you gossip, the mind interest gets into something else and for some time you feel peace. Why do we go for movies? It is because of this reason. They are all escapisms. You don't know how to face your mind. Therefore, you give an escape route for the mind. That is why the movies have become very famous. You know what happens when we see movies? Naturally, the characters are almost perfect. So what happens when you see movies? You get identified with the characters, say the hero or the heroine, whatever. And those hero and heroine, they are perfect man and woman in the world. So naturally, when you get identified with a hero, what happens? All the properties of the hero as though become your property. This is what happens with identification. Whenever you identify with someone, all the properties and characteristics of that person becomes as though your property. Yes? So in the film, when you see the hero is very strong, so you feel as though you are strong. Physically you may be very weak. The hero is very handsome, so you feel as though you are handsome. The hero is all powerful, omniscient, omnipotent. Isn't it? A romantic, a real hero, a superman. So now you feel you are also a superman. So remember, whatever happens to the hero happens to you also. Some tragedy, you will also start crying. Why? Because now that you have identified with the hero, all plus and minus of the hero becomes your plus and minus. But one good thing is, normally the movie ends, positively. The hero is far, far better than my present condition. So therefore, identification will give only peace of mind, relief. So when I am seeing the movie, naturally my real problems of the world for the time being I forget. Why do I forget? Because at present I am living not as myself, at present I am living as that character in the movie. So for the time being all my problems vanish. But when the moment movie ends, these problems come back. The moment your identification with the character ends, you become your own real self, and all your worldly problems come back unto your shoulders. So, but for the time being, for 3 hours you will feel relieved, relaxed. That is why people, consider this as a good entertainment. Meaning what? For some time you have some peace of mind. What have you actually done? You have just given an escape route for the mind. It is all escapism. Do you agree? This is called technique of distraction. These are all the different unintelligent ways of handling the mind. Is there an intelligent way? Yes, that we will see in the end, not now. Now this verse also points out another major problem which people face who don't attend satsang, who don't have scriptural knowledge. And what is that? They are totally confused with respect to what is the means and what is the end. Normally we hear people saying, you follow any path, you ultimately reach the Supreme. You follow Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Raja Yoga, right? So many vratas, so many rituals, so many pujas. Whatever you do, ultimately you become one with God. Now this is total misconception. What does scriptures say? The scriptures say that realization is a 2-stepped process. What are the 2 steps? The first step is called purification of the mind. The second step is called gaining knowledge. First step is purifying the mind. Second step is gaining knowledge. They are not optional. They are sequential. One after the other you go. So Karma Yoga purifies your mind. It does not give you knowledge. So if you say through Karma Yoga also you can realize it is wrong. If you say by mere puja or by mere Ishta Devata Upasana you can reach the Supreme, it is again wrong. Ishta Devata Upasana can purify your mind. Karma Yoga can purify your mind. It cannot give you knowledge. So what does the scripture say? The scripture says that first you purify the mind, and the second step is equally important. What is that? Gaining knowledge. And how do you gain knowledge? By the 3-fold process called Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. It is unavoidable. Study of the scriptures, listening to the scriptures, contemplation upon the scriptures, and then meditation upon the Mahavakyas. It is unavoidable for liberation. Therefore Bhagavan says, Jnana Vihinaha Sarvamatena. By all schools of thought, that person who does not put forth effort to gain knowledge, Muktim Janma Shatena na bhajati, he will never attain liberation. He may take hundreds of births. But now what is our understanding? Do whatever kind of ritual or puja or whatever do, ultimately you reach God. Nothing like that. There is a step-by-step process. Some people say you either follow Karma Yoga or follow Bhakti Yoga or follow Jnana Yoga, you will reach there. No. They are not optional branches. They are sequential. Meaning what? Like you wash your hands and then have food, isn't it? It is not optional. You either eat food or wash your hands. Now that is meaningless. Right? You do one thing and then you go do the next thing. Or something like shirt and pant you wear. Is it optional or both you have to do, isn't it? Yes, among different shirts you may choose one. That is fine. Among different pants you may choose one. But you cannot say you either wear shirt or pant. No. Is it fine? So in the same way, Jnana Yoga is absolutely important. Otherwise you will never know God as He is. So how should God be known? The ultimate knowledge of God should take place as I am God. I am not different from Him at all. This consciousness in me is God. This is the ultimate knowledge. This level one has to go. You may do your Ishta Devata Upasana. We are not criticizing all that. We are not criticizing Puja. We are not criticizing Tirtha Yatra, which has been mentioned here. Kurute Ganga Sagara Gamanam. Ganga Sagara is a place where Ganga merges with Bay of Bengal. It is a Tirtha Kshetra, a place of pilgrimage. So this person goes to all this. He goes to the places of pilgrimage. Vrata Paripalanam, follows all kinds of vows. Athava Danam, does so many charity, but this fellow does not attend satsang. That is how it has to be understood. He does all wonderful things, the so-called spiritual thing, and he thinks that this is enough. I don't have to attend all these classes and all that. Study scriptures not necessary. This is enough. This will take care of my mukti. These are some of the wrong notions in the mind. So now Bhagavan Shankaracharya is saying, he is trying to clear off all these wrong notions. So according to our scriptures, the first step is purification of the mind, and once the mind is sufficiently purified, then you go to knowledge. Why this first step called purification? This first step is essential because otherwise, even though you listen to the scriptures, nothing will sink in. You will not be able to absorb it. It is only through a pure mind you can absorb the knowledge. So without purifying the mind, if you go and sit in satsang, then also it is useless. If you only purify the mind and not strive for knowledge, then also there is no question of attaining moksha. So what is the process of gaining knowledge? The process is threefold: Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. Shravanam means listening to the scriptures. What does the scripture say? How does it define the ultimate truth called God? So first process is listening. Listening from a competent teacher. And naturally when you listen, what happens within? Doubts start arising. Because what you hear will not match with your experience. For example, the scripture says you are God. The consciousness in you is God. You are not this body. These are the statements made by the scripture. So naturally first you will revolt. How can I not be the body? When I pinch it is paining. So definitely it is me only. In so many ways the mind will argue. So then the second step is Mananam. Mananam means continuous reflection. Whatever I have heard, that cannot be wrong because a realized master is telling it. That cannot be wrong because scriptures are telling it. So you have faith in the scriptures. So definitely somewhere I am wrong. So now you reflect upon it and then remove all the doubts in your mind. The scriptures say the world is unreal. Now you ask, how can the world be unreal? I am actually experiencing it. Then you follow the logical path shown by the scriptures. So when you follow that logic, that line of thinking, slowly you get convinced. Intellectually you get convinced. All your doubts regarding the scriptures vanish. This happens through Mananam. The first stage, Shravanam, listening to the scriptures. Second stage, Mananam, which is clearing all the doubts. Third stage is called Nididhyasanam. Now when the scripture says you are pure consciousness with a body, so meditate upon consciousness. So in Nididhyasana, what do? Whatever you have understood, you start practicing it. So instead of paying attention to the body, you start paying attention to the consciousness. You start living as consciousness. This is done through meditation. Now this Sravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam forms the Jnana Yoga part. And Karma Yoga forms the purification part. As far as purification is concerned, you have a choice. You can follow Karma Yoga, you can follow Kundalini Yoga, you can follow Bhakti Yoga, whatever yoga you want to follow, you can. As far as purification is concerned, you have a choice. But as far as gaining knowledge is concerned, there is no choice. Something like how you have to enter into the temple, you have a choice. But the sanctum sanctorum, where it is, you don't have a choice. You have to enter into sanctum only through one door, isn't it? Coming into the temple, so many options are there. But entering into sanctum sanctorum, there are no options. In the same way, acquiring knowledge, there are no options. The only thing is study the scriptures from a competent teacher and gain the knowledge through listening, contemplation and meditation. Many people have this notion that doing lot of charity, doing lot of good work. Some people say, my philosophy about life is be good, do good. I don't believe in all scriptures. I don't believe in all God. This is my philosophy. Be good, do good. Wonderful, no doubt. But if you want liberation, something else also has to be done. Being good, doing good will purify the mind, no doubt. We do admit that that is essential, but that alone is not complete. That alone is not sufficient. Gaining knowledge is absolutely essential. That is why Bhagavan says, Jnana vihinaha sarvamatena bhajatina muktim janmashatena. Study of scriptures is absolutely essential. Otherwise there is always conflict. A Shiva Bhakta will say Shiva is the ultimate God. A Vishnu Bhakta will say Vishnu is the ultimate God. Isn't it? A Christian will say Jesus is the ultimate God. So everywhere you will find that description of God is varying from person to person. But the moment they come to Jnana Yoga, all the differences of opinion vanish. Why? Because now God is defined as consciousness, which is the most subtlest and the absolute description of God. Can you say consciousness is different? Consciousness is me is different from consciousness in you? No. Consciousness is the same. Whatever be your religion. Up to this we have to reach. So ultimately you will find all the saints and sages have no two opinion about God. There is only one opinion. There is no difference of opinion. Among realized saints, those people who are immature, the sadhakas, yes, they keep fighting with each other. But the really mature realized saints, they don't have any difference. Ekam sat vipra bahudha vadanti, they say. Truth is one. Description may vary, but the experience is always one. Now, the description of a person who has attained that state of realization. So till now we have seen how unintelligently the person who has no knowledge faces his mind. So first, through indulgence or through suppression or through distraction, etc. Now here is a person who knows how to actually deal with the mind. How to master the mind perfectly. Such a person's description, a realized saint, is given in verse number 18 and 19. Let us chant them. Suramandira tarumula nivasaha Shayya bhutalamajinam vasaha Sarva parigraha bhoga tyagaha Kasya sukham na karoti viragaha Yogarato va bhogarato va Sangarato va sangavihinaha Yasya brahmani ramate chetam Nandati nandati nandatyeva Bhaja govindam bhaja govindam govindam. Yes. Now how does he handle the mind? His way of handling is called the way of sublimation, which we had seen some few days back. What is this technique of sublimation? It is a twofold technique. Number one, educate the mind. Whenever the mind comes up with a desire, an ignoble desire, with a powerful intellect, an intellect which is well educated, an intellect which is well convinced by the study of the scriptures. How do you strengthen the intellect? Intellect is strengthened through study of the scriptures, through right thinking, right understanding about life. So when we study the scriptures and gain the right understanding, what you are doing is you are strengthening your intellect. Intellect is the faculty which take decisions based on right and wrong. So now, whenever the mind comes up with a desire, an ignoble desire, immediately the intellect takes over and start educating the mind. See, this desire, even if you fulfill, will have following defects. Remember all those defects which we had discussed earlier, isn't it? The normal defects which we had discussed earlier was, the worldly desires are finite. It is time bound. It creates more and more craving. Desires cannot be totally fulfilled. It makes you a slave of your mind. The intellect gets crippled. These are all the defects of worldly desires. So immediately the intellect takes over. The intellect being very powerful in this person because he has been doing the study of the scriptures daily. Through his sadhana, his intellect is very strong. Now the intellect takes over and disciplines the mind. Not a forced discipline, but a discipline based on right understanding. So, as though the intellect tells the mind, oh mind, why are you going after this worldly pleasure? You want happiness, isn't it? You want infinite happiness, isn't it? There is a source. Fix your mind, fix yourself unto the Lord. He is the very source of happiness. He is Satchit Anand. Oh mind, do you want happiness? Go to the very source. The self, the consciousness. What is the characteristics of consciousness? It is Sat, pure existence, Chit, pure consciousness, Anand. It is infinite bliss. So, oh mind, if you want happiness, why don't you go there? Now, mind only wants happiness. It doesn't matter from where it gets it. What it wants is more and more happiness. So, naturally, when the mind turns itself within, when it turns towards the source, when it turns towards this consciousness through meditation, it starts deriving tremendous amount of happiness, very high level of happiness. And once the mind is acquainted with this kind of happiness by turning within, such a mind which is saturated with the greatest source of happiness, such a mind will not go out into the world. This is the technique of sublimation. As Gurudev used to say, once you feed your dog with the best food, that dog will not wander into the gutters, isn't it? You have to feed your dog with good food. That is your responsibility. Now, who is the dog here? Our own mind. Feed it with good food. What is this good food? The joy of the self, the joy of God, the joy of devotion, the joy of meditation, the joy of higher living, the joy of selflessness, the joy of sacrifice. These are all higher joys. Once the mind tastes that higher joy, such a mind will automatically drop the lower joy. This is the intelligent way of handling the mind. Now, here is a person who has done that. So, what is the expression of such a person? The expression is total contentment. What is contentment? The moment the mind stops going out with lot of worldly desires, the moment the mind stops going out, if the mind is able to remain within, then that is called contentment. The mind is no more wandering into the sense pleasures, into the sense objects. Why it is not wandering? It is not wandering because it has already tasted the higher joy. Mind wanders only for happiness. Now this mind has got this happiness already from within, so that mind stops wandering. Such a person will have absolute control over his mind. Such a mind will remain effortlessly peaceful. So that is what is represented here. So this great Mahatma, the realized saint, what does he do? Suramandira taru moola nivasaha. He is also staying where? Under a tree, near some temple. He also doesn't have his own house, meaning completely contented. Shayya bhutalam. Where does he lie down? On the ground. No bed is necessary for him. Ajinam vasaha. What does he wear? Deer skin. Very costly? No. What it means is, in those days, lot of forests were there, deers were there in plenty, lions were also there in plenty, so deer skins were also there in plenty. So therefore, whatever is lying there somewhere, he takes it and wears it. Meaning, minimum dependence on external factor. That's what is meant. Sarva parigraha bhoga tyagaha. He has given up every parigraham. Parigraha means possessing things, accumulating things. He has given up. Why he has given up? Because now he is understanding, he is very firm that happiness does not come from outside. Happiness is my own very nature. If the source of happiness is out, then I have to go out. But now he has understood the very source of happiness within himself. So therefore, the parigraha attitude, that attitude of aggrandizing, he has stopped. Bhoga tyagaha, no more indulgence also. So here Bhagavan says, such a vairagi, such a truly dispassionate person alone is happy. Kasya sukham na karoti viragaha. Who is there who will not be happy to have such a contented mind? So what is the kind of happiness he is having? It is called happiness in spite of, not happiness because of. Now there is a difference between happiness in spite of and because of. I am happy because of this person, because of that person, because of this situation, etc., etc. Meaning, it shows dependence, it shows slavery. Happiness in spite of means, it shows mastery. Whatever happens, he is happy. In the next verse, how is he able to maintain that happiness? Yasya brahmani ramate chittam. This is the key point. Why is he happy? Because his mind is somewhere else. It is not in the world at all. Where is it? In Brahman. Brahman means what? Your own self. This pure consciousness or ultimate reality. So you will find that person as though indulging in worldly pleasures. But actually his mind is not there. Yoga va, bhoga va. At some times you may see him doing some yoga, meditation, etc. At other times you may see him superficially, apparently indulging in some bhoga. So we may think, oh, he is also a bhogi. No. He is able to give up that bhoga at will. And there is no slavery there. He is totally free. Sangaratova, sangavihinaha. Sometimes he is with people, sometimes he is all alone. In both the cases, his level of happiness remains the same. Unlike us. For us, when does the happiness come? For some people, when people are there, I am happy. For some others, when people are not there, I am happy. Both are dependence. Both are slavery. What is true freedom? True freedom is whether people are there or not, I am happy. Whether there is something to indulge or not, even then I am happy. That is called total freedom. And this person, therefore, because his mind is there in the ultimate truth, nandati, nandatyeva. Meaning what? Continuous state of happiness he enjoys. That happiness does not trickle like water, it flows like ghee or clarified water. It is continuous, uninterrupted and steady. That state of mind filled with happiness, saturated with happiness, such a wise man who has intelligently lived his life, he attains this state, which we call as God realization. Now comes the sadhana part. What are the sadhana one has to practice to gain God? Om sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kasyid dukkha bhag bhave, asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namah. Harihi Om.